Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good evening, everyone from wherever you're joining us from. We hope you and your families, loved ones are all keeping safe and well in the current situation. And welcome to our Winter 21 webinar. For our regular customers, the usual rules apply. And for those who are joining us for the first time, in a second, I'm going to hand over to the Salesforce guru that is Keir Bowden, who has poured over the 602 pages of release notes in this current release. And then as he goes through the webinar, if you've got any questions, then please do use the chat or the question section of the console. I'll collate those, and then Keir will cover those off at the end, do his best to answer your questions at that point. So as you can see in front of you, there is the agenda. Very interesting first item on there, which is well, I'm intrigued to see what that's about. And then Keir, I reckon it's over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Clive. Yeah, I felt I'm running out of ways to say features that are being retired. So we've done fond farewells, we've done it, it's been emotional, so I thought we'd have a change this time and go on to kicking the bucket, which is indeed our standard first topic. So let's say goodbye to features that have shuffled or are about to shuffle off this mortal coil. Cisco WebEx, that's being retired. The recommendation is to migrate to the Cisco App Exchange package. You can see details at the short link shown. Basically, the App Exchange package has all the features that were originally in Salesforce, and apparently Cisco have added more as well, so definitely an upgrade. Skype for Salesforce is being retired. This is more because it relies on Skype for Business, which Microsoft have retired, than Salesforce necessarily wanting to do that. The recommendation here is to look on the App Exchange for a suitable messaging solution. So it doesn't sound like there's a built-in replacement for that, unfortunately. Original territory management is retiring summer 21. This appears, it's been appearing for a while now, so that's been ongoing. So I can't imagine there's too many people that are still using it without any plans to upgrade. And the app performance beta feature from app settings has been retired, but the functionality has been lifted out and rolled into the performance analysis in the app builder, which I think we touch on later. And I've mentioned this a number of times before, the UI namespace lightning components will no longer be supported as of summer 21, which isn't that far away now. They will continue to work as they currently do, but if you have problems with them, Salesforce will decline requests for support. So next up, we have some general enhancements to Salesforce. Supported browsers, again, this is one of our standard staples. I won't go through all of these. Key point, if you've extended support for IE 11, you've got less than 3 months of that left, and the same applies to the non-Chromium flavor of Edge. Also note the line at the bottom there, Lightning Experience doesn't support Chrome Incognito or other private browsing modes. That's because the private browsing modes block third-party cookies, which Salesforce need in places, particularly around setup. In my experience, if you enable third-party cookie tracking in Incognito, it all starts to work, but I haven't tested that thoroughly, so caveat emptor. Einstein search personalization is now generally available for accounts, contacts, leads, and opportunities, so not all objects. This re-ranks search results based on things that are specific to a user, such as their recent activity, geographic location, and their ownership of objects. You have to enable the Einstein search org preference in order to take advantage of this. In-app guidance is now available for new edit and clone pages, and it also includes dialogues, as you can see there. Note that this requires My Trailhead, so there is an additional license on top of the Salesforce license required to make use of this. They also support custom theme colors, as you can see in the example there. That's got a blue theme. And also you can now share direct links to prompts and walkthroughs. So rather than someone having to go to a page and hope it pops up or try and find it somewhere, you can send a URL, they click on that and they immediately see the walkthrough. The help menu. This now searches Trailhead as well as documentation. So you can see in the screenshot here in the second result, that's a Trailhead unit that it's pointing to rather than regular help documentation. And you can also add in up to 30 resources in the custom section of the help menu, which is up from 15 in previous releases. Okay, surveys next. You can now display or hide pages in a survey based on Salesforce data. So that's actually pretty cool, I think. You can personalize the questions sent inside emails. And there's also some quick start templates that allow you to spin up a survey rapidly. If you copy a survey, which is another way of spinning up a survey rapidly, obviously, this will now retain translation, so you won't have to retranslate if you copy it. Survey functionality now respects email opt-outs, which is rather handy. I think I probably thought it already did because it seems like a reasonable thing, but apparently it didn't, and now it does. And you can now email up to 300 recipients using the Connect API, so you would have to write code in order to do that. And also note that emails sent outside of your org count against your email limit, which from memory is about 1,000 a day. So if you're sending 300 at a time, you could easily burst that limit. Some other general changes. The optimizer has a bunch of new metrics, including things like profile assignments, release updates, pending review, public groups and queues with guest users, just various things that might be exposing your data. You can schedule the optimizer now to run once a month, and you can also view metric history, so you can see if you're actually improving or getting worse. Hovering over a lookup relationship field on a record page displays the first 7 fields in the compact layout. This was 5 in previous releases. And finally, you can no longer search inside the recycle bin. Apparently this was causing performance issues, so it has been removed. No indication as to whether it's likely to come back if they solve the performance issues, but it's gone for now. So that brings us to the end of the general features. Now it's Sales Cloud. Starting with Einstein, you can now optimize your opportunity scoring model by filtering records out of it or excluding fields, so a bit more control over what constitutes a good or a bad opportunity. Lead scoring now requires less data, so if you're a smaller org and you haven't got a lot of data, Salesforce will provide data pulled from other customers to enrich it. So there won't be any details about who that is associated with, but it will give you some more data to help with that scoring. If you've customized labels for fields that are used as key factors in scoring models, your customized labels will now appear instead of the standard labels, which could be confusing. And finally, you need view all profiles permission to enable or disable opportunity and lead scoring. This is a nice new feature, opportunity deal change highlighting. So this flags up key changes in Kanban or list views. So basically, if a field is rendered in red, then an amount went down or a date went out. So basically the deal got worse. It's either going to take you longer to complete or there's less money in it. Green means the amount went up or the date came in. So you're either going to close sooner or you're going to close for more money. And if you hover over the field, you'll see who changed it and when. Some other sales specific changes. Mobile forecasting is now supported on Android, having already been available for iOS. Just as an aside on the Android side of things here, I don't know if anyone saw yesterday they announced Trailhead Go for Android as well, which is currently in beta, and I think, as I understand it, the sign-ups for beta are now full, but it shouldn't be long if you're an Android user before you see Trailhead Go generally available, so that'd be nice. So back to Sales Cloud, and there's a change to order save behavior. So if you save a line item that causes an update to the parent order, automation will now run, whereas previously that didn't have any effect regarding automation. And finally, you can update the opportunity stage directly in the forecast page by clicking on the pencil icon as shown in the little screen grab there. Emails have received a bit of love in this release. There's a new drag and drop template builder. So if you've used things like the Lightning App Builder, the Flow Builder, it should be a relatively familiar layout. There's a palette of actions on the left-hand side, canvas in the center where you drag and drop things. And when you click on a component in the palette, then the properties are displayed in the right-hand sidebar for you to edit. So very familiar from certainly the Lightning App Builder. And here's a screenshot of in action where, for those who use the Lightning App Builder, it should be really, really familiar. The rich text component you can see down the bottom there has been clicked, and the content is available for edit in the right-hand side. That's not all for email though, there's some more enhancements. The maximum outbound email size has been increased by 10 meg to 35 meg. Default encoding for emails is now UTF-8. So this applies to new orgs and new users. If you're an existing user, you keep your existing settings, so nothing will change underneath people. And finally, when an email bounces, bounce alerts will be shown for all contacts and leads with the same email rather than just the one that reported the error. Finally, in Sales Cloud, some product changes. So you can now see aggregate email metrics in the Lightning experience via the Engagement Metrics tab. You can preview and test emails before you send them to prospects to make sure they're pixel perfect. Einstein Campaign Insights now provide trend information for a prospect's company size, so you can see if you're targeting the right companies that are growing. And you can set an opportunity stage as a success milestone rather than the default behavior, which is lead conversion, when determining whether to attribute a converted lead to a campaign, or an opportunity to a campaign, I should say. And marketers have full control over the send experience after creating email content, so they can select a campaign, select the recipient, select a suppression list, choose the sender name, sender email, completion action, so they have full control over that now. It's the end of Sales Cloud, so moving on to Service Cloud. So bots first. Updates to the guided setup flow should help new and experienced bot builders create them faster. And if you're a new bot builder and you haven't done it before, there's quick start templates available. More granular permissions allow you to create bots as a team without necessarily giving away full control over everything. So you can have certain team members who've got read-only access, others can maintain the bot, and others may be able to train the bot, but you have a lot of control over that. Whereas before, I think we pretty much had to give them access and hope they didn't do anything bad. Custom context variable mapping, that helps a bot act on incoming context from a customer by mapping custom variables. And bot session metrics have been enhanced, showing when a bot transfers to an agent or another bot, and shows each rule action, and it also shows rule elements with conditions. Onto Service Cloud Einstein. So if you have the Try Einstein version of case classification, this now recommends values just once when the case is created, rather than the way it worked before, which was they got processed on an hourly basis. So you might have to wait some time for that to happen. No longer, it'll happen immediately. Case classification can predict a dependent field without the parent field being included in the model, so dependent pick lists don't need the parent pick list in there. If a case classification update fails, so if it can't update a field, you'll see a platform event fired, and that will include the error code as to why that field couldn't be updated. The Einstein replies component can be docked so that replies can be sent from any sub-tab in the console. It ties itself to the current tab's open chat or messaging session, so that's how it knows which one it's going to recommend replies for. All Lightning Knowledge users now see Einstein article recommendations, whereas previously there was a user permission that had to be assigned. And if you don't have enough high quality data to activate an Einstein article recommendations model, you will be notified that that has happened, rather than it silently failing and you wondering why you don't get any recommendations. Voice. This is quite a hot topic at the moment, I think, within Salesforce world. So Service Cloud Voice is now available for Sales Cloud, so it won't be long before it's just called Voice, I would have thought, rather than Service Cloud Voice. But this is a charged add-on license for sales and or service, so whichever way you use it, you'll have to pay for it. So the setup has been improved, it's got better guidance, and also more of the steps required on AWS have been automated. The Voice Toolkit API is generally available, and the voice call records behave a bit more like a first-class citizen, not quite there yet, but you can kick off automation, so flow, process builder, and workflow, so only low-code automation, no triggers there. And these records also support macros, quick actions, and chatter feeds, so they're becoming more like regular S-object records, but as I say, not quite there yet. Agents can pause and resume call recordings via the button or the toggle shown. So this allows agents to avoid recording sensitive information. I must say the cynic in me says it also allows agents to avoid recording information that might reflect badly on them. So I guess it depends on your outlook as to how much of a good or bad thing that is. The call recording player component has been updated with a progress indicator, a call type indicator, and a timestamp. And finally, the call transfer interface has been improved. Now this allows agents to add another caller and then leave the conversation, so it's a much more structured approach there. A few minor changes in messaging. Templates now allowed you to include fields from leads and opportunities. Previously, I think they allowed accounts and contacts. There are more granular permissions. Again, a little bit of a theme with the bot permissions as well. So more granular permissions, separating read and edit, etc. Couple of renames on the omnichannel routing types. Omnichannel queue is now omnichannel, and omnichannel skills are now channel skills. And messaging now supports skills-based routing, so you can ensure a messaging session is routed to the highest qualified agent. Knowledge articles, these can now be shared with site guest users and high volume community users, which you could do before in various ways, but it's now in step with the way that the rest of Salesforce manages sharing of objects. So knowledge articles were slightly an outlier. They now behave like the standard ones, which one thing it means is that for guest users, the sharing will need to be enabled through the guest site security rather than anything you might do on the profile, etc. You can change ownership of published and archived articles in Lex. You've been able to do this with draft articles since Spring 20, so now the various additional types. And draft articles, including translations, can have their ownership changed en masse. And finally, ownership of knowledge articles can now be tracked through the knowledge field history, so you can see how that has bounced around in terms of who owns that article through its life cycle. Just going to pause for a sip. Tea this time rather than water, it's a very nice change. Finally, on to Service Cloud. On Service Cloud, we've got cases. So email to case threading now matches information in the headers of the email rather than pulling an ID from the subject or body, which improves security, basically. That can't be tampered with, or can't be tampered with so easily anyway. 3 pre-built flows are available to speed up repetitive processes. So there's create a case, reset password, and verify identity. So note, these are for the agent, they're not for users. It's still the agent doing the work. It's just a guided set of clicks rather than them having to think about how they do things. There's also a couple of pre-built macros and quick text to improve agent productivity. So requesting more agent from customers, sending a follow-up email after cases are closed, that kind of thing. And the service setup assistant helps you get set up and into a console app in a very short time. Okay, moving on, analytics. Not too many changes in this, so we'll be through this fairly quickly. But one important one, you can now subscribe to a report and have the output emailed to you as an attachment, either as a formatted report in XLSX format, which I understand is how they should have been capturing the COVID-19 information, but they did an XSL, which can't handle quite as many rows, or as a CSV file. If it's a CSV attachment, you can choose the encoding type. And Einstein Analytics, you can now calculate dates with a date and time transformation instead of having to make manual queries. Sharing inheritance, so row level security, that's now available for data sets created from data prep recipes. You can edit a data set with a single click from its name in the data set list rather than having to go into another page and then clicking on that. So a few clicks saved. And a few changes when you're building an app. So you can freeze up to 5 columns in a compare table or a values table in Explorer and Dashboard Designer. You can expand and collapse group columns. You can use conditional formatting in dashboard text. And another security improvement, you can lock and hide filters, which stops people changing them to be able to view more data. So you can restrict what people can do in terms of what data they can see and make sure they can't expand their remit. So communities now, I told you analytics was very quick. So communities, the pages menu supports up to 6 levels of subpage. So the first highlight here in the screenshot shows 3 levels of nesting, parent, child, grandchild. And the second call out shows the menu with the add subpage option. So basically you would just pick the thing and then decide to add a subpage to it. Once you've created the subpage, the URL will reflect its position. You can also change that if you need to, and that shows up obviously when people are navigating around the community. Other changes for communities, you can apply audiences to record detail pages now based on the record criteria. So you can show slightly different layouts, etc., depending on what type of record it is. Record details and list views now have a printable view. So this generates a condensed view of the data suitable for printing out. Although why people would be printing out now, because not really going anywhere. Typically that you would print them out, read them in the back of the taxi going somewhere. I can't imagine there's too much of that going on now. External users can now manage other external users with external managed accounts. And you can customize the email template used when community members change their email address. Again, not many changes on communities because we're now onto mobile. Salesforce mobile app, Android 7+, iOS 12+, and you can find the devices that are used for testing at the short link shown here. If your device isn't one of those used for testing, Salesforce may not be able to replicate any issues you have. So you may have a bit of a harder time getting support. Scrolling and refreshing the app will be smoother going forward, and if you use VoiceOver for iOS for accessibility, the screen scrolling buttons no longer appear. And the activity timeline is available in iOS for leads, opportunities, contacts, and accounts. So still iOS is where the new features tend to land first, and then Android catches up a little or a lot later, depending on which features it is. There's a new Lightning Web component for use in mobile called the Mobile Launchpad component. So this allows you to add shortcuts to essential pages, pages in the system that the users use all the time, and embed them in any page via the Lightning App Builder. So this is a standard set, so it's not a different set for each user. You can add up to 20 items, and the first 6 are displayed. But note that users still have to navigate to the page that you added the component to. There's no way of getting that on the kind of the landing page of the mobile, as far as I'm aware. So it doesn't remove all the clicks, but it should be one click if they need to go somewhere and then jump off into other places. And report highlights in the mobile app. So these provide a high-level overview of the report, including up to 8 metrics of the type shown there. I won't read them all out. I'm sure you can all read. And for summary and matrix reports, you can see totals for groups based on the first level grouping field. And finally, on mobile notifications. So once the require user permission for send notification update is applied, users need the send custom notifications user permission to trigger a notification from flows that run in the user context, REST API calls, or Apex callouts. If the user doesn't have this permission, the automation will error at that point. And this is a very cool feature, the page reference target. So previously, you could, through a notification, you could only send a user to a record, whereas now you can send them anywhere that can be captured via a page reference. So you add that to your notification, and that can send them off to an internal or external page, wherever you like. So I think that's made notifications, for me, a lot more useful. Work.com, this is going to be very short. Oh, sorry, gone too far. That was very short indeed. We're not actually going to cover Work.com because it's on a separate release cycle. So anything I tell you here could be out of date almost immediately. And this is because it's released as managed packages, and functionality is updated when new package versions become available. The release notes get updated when that happens. So what you want to track is the release notes in the Salesforce help at the short link shown here. So customization next. Another big one on flows, in keeping with the last couple of releases we've had, the before delete flow is generally available. So this allows you to do most of the things you can do in the before delete trigger. So another area where you may not need to write code if you don't want to. So these are invoked when an action takes place that would cause a record to be deleted, but before the record is actually removed from the database. In a before delete flow, you can access any record and you can extract information from the record that's being deleted via the $record global variable. A difference between this and Apex triggers is there's no undelete support for when a record is retrieved from the recycle bin, when it's basically put back into main storage. So if you wanted automation around that, you would have to use an Apex trigger. The other thing I think that's not quite there is if you want to stop the record being deleted, the only way to do it is to cause an error in the flow, which produces a big ugly error message for the user. Whereas in Apex, you can add an error to the record and it kind of gets picked up like a validation rule error and just has slightly nicer formatting. Some more flow changes. You can run a screen or auto-launched flow as another user for debug purposes, but in a sandbox only, not in production. You can define entry criteria for record-triggered flows, so you don't waste resources running through and checking records that you aren't interested in. You know, the platform does that for you. You can also include the record changes in decision criteria, so determining what action to take only if the record has been updated to match it. The and, or, and custom operators are now available for all flow builder elements. I don't know which ones they weren't available for before, but they're on all of them now. And where possible, flow builder errors will include a link to the component that errored that you can click on to open that element, if that can be determined. Yet more flow changes. You can now access related records without having to query them. So much like you would in a formula, you can just navigate from a record through its related records rather than having to execute a get records call. So that actually should speed things up quite a bit. That's quite a nice feature. Be quite nice to have that in Apex and honestly in triggers. Anywhere that supports variables can now access all global variables. Merge fields now display their labels rather than the underlying syntax that allows you access to that field, although you can still get at that. Pick list previews, both for single and multi-select pick lists, are no longer interactive. Apparently this wasn't always helpful, so I'm guessing they didn't always behave as they would in the live flow, so it wasn't really giving you anything, but I don't know the exact detail of that. And some runtime changes are going to be associated with an API version. So you'll be able to run your flow at an earlier API version and not necessarily involve new features if you don't want to, so giving you a bit more control over when you adopt those features. Even more flow changes. You can certainly see which teams are getting the investment right now. So triggers in flows, for flows rather, can be seen from the flows list view in setup by the new triggers column, so you no longer have to click into a flow to figure out what triggers it. Changing the record name in record owner rather in Classic now triggers a flow. Previously this only happened in Lightning Experience, so a rare occurrence of Classic being updated to give feature parity with Lightning there. You can embed custom Lightning web components in flows which apply to generic S objects now, so they don't have to be specific to contact, account, etc. They can work with any type of record, so should make those types of flow components massively reusable. And finally, the custom property editor is generally available. So this allows you to create Lightning web components to configure flow elements. Dynamic forms are generally available. So we introduced these in the beta section of the Summer 20 webinar. So these allow you to break up record fields and sections into discrete areas of a Lightning record page decoupled from the page layout. This is Lightning App Builder only. You have to migrate your existing pages to be able to use these, which sounds a little bit scary, but actually it's just clicking a button. It doesn't really do anything. It just moves it over to the new framework, I think. There's support for edit, create, and clone dialogues, and this is for record pages, currently for custom objects only. Dynamic actions are also generally available, but this is only for custom objects on the desktop. They're in beta for standard objects on the desktop and for custom objects on mobile, with no word about standard objects on mobile. So like dynamic forms, you have to migrate your existing pages. Again, like dynamic forms, it doesn't really do very much apart from move them over to the new framework. The actions include submit for approval, and its current incarnation is per action conditional visibility. So in the example here, I've got the new opportunity action, and I've filtered that to say that it's conditionally rendered based on having the system administrator profile. So when I access the page as a system administrator, I see new opportunity. When I access as any other profile, the button is hidden. So again, it feels like a kind of slightly small change in terms of what you can do with it, but actually I've had a load of situations where I wanted to be able to conditionally render a button based on some feature, and it's not just the profile, it's like the other conditional rendering, so it can be on custom permissions or facets of the record, etc. So I think that's going to be really useful going forward, gives a lot more granularity. Performance analysis in the app builder. So I think we mentioned this as to where some of the functionality had moved out of setup. So basically this evaluates your fields, related lists and metadata of a desktop record page, and it recommends improvements. The Privacy Center. So this is a managed package that you would install into your Salesforce org, and it shows you your privacy policies, recommendations, and notifications of changes to consent or contact objects. Consent or contact information on all core objects. So it's a single stop for your privacy, basically, which should save a little bit of time navigating around the system. Other customization changes, you can manage deleted fields in Lightning Experience rather than having to switch back to Classic, something I do a lot of, so I'm really pleased to see that one. You can choose the alignment of the utility bar. You can either align it bottom right or bottom left, and this will default based on the direction of the user's language. My domain is going to be enforced in winter 22, so you've got a year yet, but if you don't have one, you will be automatically assigned one based on your company name. So if you want to say, you've got about 12 months to decide what you want that to be. And mobile device tracking allows you to track, monitor, and revoke the mobile devices that are accessing your Salesforce data. Right, moving on to my favorite topic, development. So this is something that's been around for a while, and certainly any of our service customers would know about this happening because we've been working with them to ensure they're all up to speed. Basically, Aura-enabled classes, so these are the controller classes for Aura components or Lightning Web components. So this is going to be restricted in winter 21 for guest portal and authenticated users, so basically everyone. So a user that accesses a web component that relies on access to an Apex server, sorry, an Apex class on the server, will need access to that Apex class in their profile or permission set. It's not overly arduous to set up even if you've got quite a lot of Lightning Web components, because they're typically bundled into a single page, etc. But if you don't have those, you'll just get an error. You can now send custom notifications from Apex. So this is quite nice. Previously, I've had to change a record and do it from Process Builder. So that's good. That's going to save me some time. And there's also a new Quiddity enum that allows you to determine the context in which your Apex is running, which is also very cool because you might want to take different actions depending on if you've been invoked from Apex REST versus if you're in, I don't know, scheduled Apex or something like that. Next up, and I'm going to spend a few slides on this because this is actually really cool. It's a fairly small change to the language, but it actually saves us quite a lot of code. So before I show you the code for this, I want to set the scene. So imagine we've got a set of related classes, Apex classes. So we've got a book which has a reference to an author that may be null, and and the author has a reference to a publisher that may be null. And imagine we've got some sample data, Visualforce Development Cookbook, which I wrote, published by Pact, all about doing sport, which Clive wrote. No one's come around to publish that yet. And the third is, will there ever be a rainbow, which no one is admitting to writing, although if you're a Simpsons fan, you might recognize that one. So here's
that's a rip-roaring read. If you ever get to see a copy of All About Doing Sport, it's a rip-roaring read, let me tell you.
So here's the traditional way of doing this. I want to put out some information. My use case is I want to put out some information about the book. I want to put out the name and the author and the publisher if they're defined. So here's my traditional way of doing this. Put out the title, then I'll check, is the author reference defined? If it is, great, I can put that out, and then check the publisher reference, and if that is, great, I can put that out. Otherwise, I clean up and I put out that they're all null. There's quite a bit of code in there, just to put out a few straightforward bits of information, because they might be null and I don't know without checking. The safe navigation operator turns this into 3 lines of code using the question mark dot operator. So basically, what the question mark dot says is if the left-hand side of the operator is null, return null. If the left-hand side of the operator is not null, then evaluate the right-hand side. So in this case, if book.author is null, I get null. If book.author is not null, then I can continue and get book.author.name. But I don't have to do any of that. I don't have to care about that. The platform takes care of it for me. Very, very cool. Most of the developers I know are very excited about that. If you're not a developer, you probably can't see why it's so great, but it is, trust me. There are some restrictions around that, which you can read at the short link shown. You can suspend or resume platform event triggers from the UI. So this is actually quite nice. And also when you resume, you can choose between where it left off or the earliest available message. Previously, you had to deactivate a trigger to suspend processing, which is not a straightforward thing to do. Normally requires a deployment. Some other development changes. You can access it's one of the things I was saying about what you can do in a trigger. You can add an error to an S object, but if another trigger had added an error to an object you didn't know, the only way of finding out was to try and save it to the database and see if you got an error. Whereas now you can access the errors that you can say has the object got errors attached to it, and you can also get those errors and see what was wrong with it, see if it's worth you continuing on and trying to do anything, or if it's all over at that point in time. Second generation unlocked packages require 75% coverage now to be promoted to non-beta. So they need to be non-beta in order to install in production. So if you don't have 75% test coverage, you can only install in developer or additional sandboxes, and you won't be able to upgrade it. And HTTP request calls now support the patch method, which is an idea that's been open for a long time, and makes the HTTP request equivalent of a lot of modern frameworks. So this brings us to the end of the generally available features. Everything we talk about now is in beta or earlier, caveat emptor. So the reason we have the caution sign here and a flag on all sides referring to beta, they're preview features. They are not part of the services in your master subscription agreement with Salesforce. They are not supported, so if you have problems, you may be on your own. They may never go live. Einstein Voice is an example of that from I think that was around in spring 19 in beta, and summer 20 it had been withdrawn. They can also be pulled at any time, so not just when a major release comes out. So if you build anything mission critical around beta functionality, that is a courageous decision, and make sure you can do without whatever you've built at a moment's notice. As usual, I ask the question, why would you use beta features? It's a good way to evaluate the functionality that's coming and figuring out how useful that will be to you, and how you might be able to roll it out, but it is very much early access. This one is very cool. When you add a new custom field to an object, which is part of a custom report type, you can have the field automatically added to the custom report type. I have spent a lot of time adding these in over the years, I would say. Right, the next beta feature, it's not moving. All right, the next beta feature, a couple of flow features. So debugging auto-launched flows directly from the canvas, and also auto layout of flows, which I think could be quite useful because flows often end up looking a bit complicated and a bit ugly. So if you have a flow that looks like this, and then you toggle the switch to for the auto layout, then it will change to look like this. So it'll be laid out a bit better. I don't know whether you've got any control over how that happens. I haven't actually had a chance to play around with this myself yet, but it feels like being able to reorder things nicely could be very useful. There's a new Lightning Web component for scanning barcodes. So this works in the mobile application or the community mobile publisher only. And it scans UPC, so that's your standard barcodes, the kind of lines in a row, and QR codes, and also other standard codes, but it doesn't go into a great amount of detail about that. But this is an interesting development for me because it's giving access to a native feature of the device. So basically something is using the camera to scan that QR code and then taking action. And it's something that I know that I've asked Salesforce about in the past, like when are we going to get access to some of the more standard phone type functionality? And it feels like this might be the future. So we get some access to it, but wrapped inside a Lightning Web component, so there's full control and we're not just going wandering off around other people's devices. But we shall see. And our final beta feature, Salesforce Anywhere. So this is a collection of functionality providing chat and alerts around Salesforce data, live data in documents and spreadsheets through Quip, and suggested actions. This one is an open beta, so if you're interested in taking part, you can follow the short link and you should be able to get onto it. Which brings us to the end of our main feature. So thank you everyone for sticking with us. 41 minutes, not too bad for 60 odd slides. As usual, we've picked the items we think will be of most interest, specifically to our customers rather than everybody who may be joining. There's plenty more information at the Salesforce release readiness site at the short link shown. There's a Trailhead badge available, which walks you through a load of the features required. There's 10 quizzes on that. Each quiz has about 4 or 5 sections, so fair bit of information there. I've done it, took a couple of hours. Yeah, and you've got webinar recordings, videos, and all the other usual stuff that Salesforce produce when a new release is coming along. So I'm going to sit back in my chair and ask Clive, do we have any questions?
Oh, I really wish there were. I was really hoping that this audience would at least pose something from slide 3, you know, to catch you out. But unfortunately, you, as per usual, you've explained it beautifully. So we do have no questions. Oh, hold on. Oh, we do have a question. Oh, I take it all back. So we can ask, Right, so don't lean back. You need to get forward here. There's a question.
So close.
There were rumours of the share button for Lightning feature and the ability for Outlook integration and sync to handle multiple inboxes being added in this release. Assume as they're not mentioned, this has not happened. Any news?
Well, I don't remember seeing the Lightning share button, I must admit, and I do remember seeing things that was on its way. I mean, there were a number of things that I had in this deck that I took out as they got pulled, because obviously we get preview release notes and then not everything makes it into the release. I don't remember seeing the Lightning share button. The Outlook side of things, I'm not an Outlook user, and I don't know how many we have that are Outlook users. It's not something I usually cover, so it's not something I usually go into in great detail. So I can't really speak to that one, but I would suggest if you email that question into Clive, then somebody will answer that for you.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. If you just want to send that to Clive Platt at BrightGen.com, I'll get that answered for you. So I think, Keir, that's about it. Well, many thanks. 602 pages, that's quite a feat. Are they getting longer, these release notes?
Sadly, they are. We'll be up to around 800 or 900, and it will be a 2-hour session with 150 slides the way we're going.
We look forward to that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for your time. I hope you found that useful. If there's any features of the release that you would like to discuss separately with us, by all means, get in touch with me again, and I can arrange for a session to go through those. We'll be sending out the recording and the slide deck as per usual. And as I say, hope you enjoyed the session. Any questions, come to me, and we'll see you at Spring 21. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.